The silent erosion of mental clarity. The modern world often accepts the gradual dimming of the mind as an inevitable consequence of passing time, treating memory loss as a tax paid for longevity. This passive acceptance contradicts the potential for a sharp, vibrant intellect that can actually deepen with age rather than wither. A different perspective suggests that the clouding of consciousness is frequently self-inflicted through daily habits that accumulate like rust on a blade. The human body possesses an innate capacity for regeneration and clarity, yet this potential is systematically undermined by inputs that create inflammation and stagnation. By identifying and removing the specific dietary obstacles that disrupt neural function, an individual steps onto a path of reclaimed vitality. The journey requires a shift from seeking comfort in flavor to seeking power in fuel, guided by the understanding that physical purity directly dictates mental precision. Heng emphasizes that self-mastery begins with the management of the physical vessel, for the mind cannot soar when the body is anchored by toxicity. The sweet deception of cognitive decline, the most pervasive adversary to cognitive longevity, often arrives disguised as a source of quick energy and comfort. Refined sugar and simple carbohydrates create a volatile environment within the body that fundamentally disrupts the brain's delicate signaling systems. When an individual consumes high amounts of sugar, the resulting spike in blood glucose demands a massive release of insulin to manage the influx. Over decades, this relentless cycle desensitizes the cells, leading to a condition often described by researchers as diabetes of the brain. The neurons, starved of their primary fuel source because they can no longer accept glucose efficiently, begin to atrophy and die. This biological mechanism explains why individuals with high sugar intake show a significantly faster rate of hippocampal shrinkage, the area of the brain responsible for memory consolidation. The damage is not merely structural but functional, manifesting as a persistent brain fog that makes complex tasks feel insurmountable. The immediate pleasure of sweetness masks the long-term erosion of neural connectivity, creating a dependency that weakens the will as much as it weakens the metabolism. Heng teaches that the first step to mastery is the removal of hindrances that cloud the spirit and the mind. Sugar acts as a sensory hindrance, creating a chaotic fluctuation in energy levels that makes sustained focus impossible. A mind governed by sugar cravings is a mind in a constant state of reaction rather than intention. The discipline to refuse these fleeting pleasures is not an act of deprivation, but an act of liberation. By stabilizing blood sugar, the individual stabilizes their emotional state and mental clarity, allowing for a calmness that is essential for deep insight. The removal of this dietary noise quiets the internal environment, making space for the natural intelligence of the body to repair itself. This process mirrors the martial arts principle of grounding, where stability is the foundation from which all power and movement must originate. Without this metabolic stability, the mind remains frantic and unmoored, unable to retain the wisdom it accumulates. In a practical daily scenario, consider the routine of a person who starts their day with a sweet pastry and a flavored coffee. The initial burst of alertness feels productive, leading them to believe they are fueled for the morning ahead. However, within 2 hours, a heavy lethargy sets in, accompanied by difficulty in recalling names or details from a meeting just moments prior. This crash is often met with more sugar or caffeine to bridge the gap, perpetuating a roller coaster of inflammation. The individual interprets this as a sign of aging or tiredness, unaware that their breakfast has triggered a cascade of neuroinflammation. The brain is struggling to clear the metabolic waste produced by the sugar overload, leaving the person feeling mentally sluggish and irritable. This daily cycle, repeated over years, calcifies into permanent cognitive deficits that no amount of mental exercises can fully reverse without dietary intervention. It is important to acknowledge that not all carbohydrates act as enemies to the brain. Complex carbohydrates found in vegetables and whole grains release energy slowly and come packaged with fiber, that mitigates the insulin response. The body requires fuel, and the brain consumes a disproportionate amount of the body's energy. The distinction lies in the speed of absorption and the presence of nutrients. A complete elimination of all carbohydrates is not the goal for everyone and can sometimes lead to stress if not managed correctly. However, the modern diet is so saturated with refined sugars that the baseline for most people is toxic abundance. The shift away from these inflammatory foods allows the brain to utilize cleaner fuel sources, such as ketones or steady glucose, which burn more efficiently and produce fewer free radicals. This metabolic flexibility is a hallmark of a resilient system capable of weathering the stresses of aging without breaking. The philosophy of Shaolin reminds the student that the body is the temple of the mind, and one does not bring garbage into a temple. The decision to cut out refined sugars is a practice of respect for one's own potential. It requires a heightened awareness of how food influences the state of being, moving beyond the tongue's preference to the body's true needs. When the fog of sugar addiction lifts, the individual often discovers that their memory was not failing, but merely obscured. The clarity that returns is sharp and profound, revealing that the mind was always capable, only suppressed. This realization brings a sense of agency, proving that cognitive health is not a lottery, but a direct result of the choices made at the dinner table. The restoration of insulin sensitivity opens the door to renewed neuroplasticity, allowing the brain to forge new connections well into the later years. The social pressure to consume sweets is immense, deeply embedded in celebrations and communal rituals. Declining a slice of cake or a sweetened drink can be perceived by others as rigid or antisocial. Yet, this friction is part of the path to self-mastery. Standing firm in one's commitment to health despite external expectations builds a different kind of strength, a mental fortitude that reinforces the neural pathways of discipline. Every time the individual chooses clarity over immediate gratification, they're training their mind to prioritize long-term vision over short-term impulse. This mental discipline translates directly to cognitive resilience, as the same circuits used for self-control are strengthened. The path is solitary at times, but the reward is a mind that remains an impenetrable fortress against the ravages of time. There is a profound connection between the gut and the brain, often called the second brain, which is heavily influenced by sugar intake. An overgrowth of harmful bacteria fed by sugar produces toxins that can cross the blood-brain barrier, leading to mood instability and memory gaps. By starving these harmful microbes, the individual reduces the toxic load on the brain. The restoration of the microbiome supports the production of neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which are essential for learning and mood regulation. This biological reality aligns with the holistic view that nothing in the body is isolated. The health of the digestion is the health of the thought. Heng often speaks of a unity of all things, and nowhere is this more evident than in the link between a clean diet and a clear mind. The seemingly small act of refusing sugar resonates through the entire system, creating harmony where there was once discord. As the inflammation subsides, the brain's natural cleaning systems, known as the glymphatic system, become more effective. This system is most active during sleep and is responsible for washing away the beta-amyloid plaques associated with Alzheimer's disease. High sugar levels and insulin resistance impair this cleaning process, allowing debris to accumulate. By reducing sugar, the individual enhances their brain's ability to detoxify itself nightly. The result is waking up with a mind that feels fresh and ready, rather than groggy and slow. This nightly renewal is critical for memory consolidation, turning the experiences of the day into long-term knowledge. The protection of this mechanism is one of the most powerful strategies for ensuring that the wisdom gained in a lifetime is preserved rather than lost. The transition away from sugar often reveals the underlying emotional attachments one has to food. It exposes the moments where food was used to soothe anxiety, boredom, or sadness. Confronting these emotions without the buffer of sugar is a part of the internal work that Heng advocates. It forces the individual to develop healthier coping mechanisms, such as breathing, movement, or meditation. This emotional maturity further protects the brain, as chronic stress is another major factor in memory loss. By breaking the cycle of emotional eating, the individual reduces cortisol levels, further sparing the hippocampus from damage. The physical change facilitates a psychological evolution, proving that the cultivation of the body is the cultivation of the spirit. What creates the emptiness I try to fill with sweetness. The heavy burden of preserved toxicity, the allure of convenience, often leads to the consumption of processed meats, a category of food that carries a heavy hidden cost for neural integrity. Bacon, sausages, deli meats, and cured hams are staples in many diets, valued for their savory taste and ease of preparation. However, these foods are chemically altered to preserve shelf life and enhance color, primarily through the use of nitrates and nitrites. Upon ingestion, these compounds can convert into nitrosamines, which are potent cellular toxins. The liver attempts to filter these substances, but when the intake is frequent, the system becomes overwhelmed, allowing inflammatory agents to circulate in the bloodstream. These agents cause oxidative stress, a process where unstable molecules damage cell structures, including the delicate neurons of the brain. The accumulation of this damage over time leads to a progressive decline in cognitive speed and recall accuracy. Heng speaks of the concept of heaviness, not just as physical weight, but as a quality of energy that slows down the spirit. Processed meats embody this quality of heaviness. They are dense, difficult to digest, and laden with synthetic preservatives that the body does not recognize as food. Consuming them requires a significant expenditure of vital energy for digestion and detoxification, energy that is essentially stolen from the brain. When the body is burdened with the task of neutralizing toxins, the mind loses its sharpness and agility. The practitioner of self-cultivation seeks foods that provide energy without exacting a tax on the system. To consume processed meat is to introduce stagnation into the body, creating a sluggish environment where thoughts struggle to move with fluidity. The removal of these heavy foods lifts a burden from the physiology, allowing the natural lightness of being to re-emerge. In the context of daily life, consider the individual who relies on a ham sandwich or a pepperoni pizza for lunch during a busy work week. The meal is quick and filling, fitting perfectly into a rushed schedule. Yet the afternoon that follows is characterized by a subtle mental dullness. The creative problem-solving abilities that were present in the morning seem to evaporate, replaced by a need for routine, low-effort tasks. This dip in performance is rarely attributed to the lunch meat, but the correlation is biologically distinct. The influx of sodium and preservatives raises blood pressure, straining the delicate capillaries in the brain, while the inflammatory response begins to degrade the protective myelin sheath around nerve fibers. Over years, this lunchtime habit contributes to a measurable reduction in brain volume, particularly in areas associated with complex reasoning. It is necessary to address the argument that meat has been a part of human diets for millennia. The issue lies not necessarily with meat itself, but with the processing. Fresh, unprocessed meats do not carry the same load of nitrates and extreme sodium levels. The danger is specific to the industrial manipulation of food, where the priority is profit and longevity of the product rather than the longevity of the consumer. However, even with unprocessed meats, moderation is key. A diet heavily skewed toward animal proteins can still be acidic and inflammatory if not balanced with an abundance of alkaline vegetables. The wise approach is one of discernment, understanding the difference between a natural source of protein and a chemically treated product that mimics food. The body responds to the quality of the input, and the brain is the first organ to register the difference between nourishment and toxicity. The discipline required to forego the salty, savory appeal of processed meats is a training ground for the will. It involves planning and preparation, shifting away from the grab-and-go mentality that dominates modern eating. Heng emphasizes that there are no shortcuts to mastery. The effort put into preparing fresh, whole food is an investment in one's own life force. This preparation itself can become a meditative practice, a moment of connecting with the source of one's sustenance. When an individual takes the time to cook fresh ingredients, they're signaling to their subconscious that they are worthy of care. This shift in mindset reduces the reliance on convenience foods, breaking the cycle of toxic accumulation. The result is a body that feels cleaner and a mind that operates with greater speed and accuracy. Nitrates are not the only concern. The high sodium content in processed meats stiffens the blood vessels, reducing the efficiency of oxygen delivery to the brain. The brain is a voracious consumer of oxygen, and any restriction in blood flow manifests as cognitive decline. Vascular dementia, a condition caused by reduced blood flow to the brain, is strongly linked to diets high in salt and processed foods. By eliminating these foods, the blood vessels regain their elasticity, ensuring that the brain receives a constant, rich supply of oxygenated blood. This physical openness mirrors the mental openness that Heng advocates, a state where energy flows without restriction, allowing for heightened awareness and perception. The physical vessel must be kept open and pliable to support a mind that is flexible and adaptive. There is also a significant impact on the gut microbiome from the preservatives found in processed meats. These chemicals are designed to kill bacteria to prevent spoilage, and they do not distinguish between the bacteria on the meat and the beneficial bacteria in the human gut. A disrupted microbiome fails to produce short-chain fatty acids that protect the brain from inflammation. The gut-brain axis is compromised, leading to increased anxiety and a decreased ability to handle stress. Stress is a known killer of brain cells. Therefore, the elimination of processed meats is a direct strategy for stress management and emotional resilience. A calm gut facilitates a calm mind, creating the internal conditions necessary for deep focus and memory retention. Counterarguments often suggest that moderation makes these foods harmless. While the body has detoxification pathways, the cumulative effect of small, daily doses of toxins should not be underestimated. In a world already filled with environmental pollutants, adding dietary stress is unwise. The threshold for damage lowers as the body ages, meaning that what the body could tolerate at 20 becomes harmful at 60. The goal is to reduce the total toxic load to the lowest possible level. This is not about living in fear of food, but about making choices that align with the desire for a lucid and active old age. It is a proactive stance, taking responsibility for the internal environment rather than leaving it to chance. The transition requires a re-education of the palate. The intense salt and umami flavors of processed meats can desensitize the taste buds to the subtle, complex flavors of natural foods. As one eliminates these hyperpalatable foods, the sense of taste recovers. Simple roasted vegetables or fresh fish begin to taste rich and satisfying. This recovery of sensory acuity is parallel to the recovery of mental acuity. The numbness lifts from the senses and the mind simultaneously. Heng often speaks of waking up, of moving from a state of sleepwalking through life to a state of full presence. Removing the sedative effects of heavy, toxic foods is a crucial part of this awakening. It allows the individual to experience life with greater vibrancy and to retain those experiences with crystal clear memory. Why do I choose convenience over my own vitality? The stagnation of neural pathways, the integrity of the brain, relies heavily on the quality of the fats that construct its cell membranes. Trans fats and industrial seed oils, often found in fried foods, baked goods, and margarine, act as structural saboteurs within the nervous system. These artificial fats mimic natural lipids and are incorporated into the cell walls of neurons. However, unlike natural fats, which are flexible and fluid, trans fats are rigid and straight. When they integrate into the cell membrane, they cause the membrane to stiffen, reducing its ability to transmit electrical signals. This cellular rigidity slows down communication between neurons, literally reducing the speed of thought. The brain becomes sluggish, as the fluid exchange of neurotransmitters is physically impeded by the hardening of the cellular architecture. This creates a state of biological stagnation where information cannot flow freely, mirroring the physical lethargy that follows a meal of heavy, fried food. Heng teaches that life is movement and that stagnation is the precursor to decay. In the martial arts, stiffness is a weakness. Power comes from fluidity and the ability to adapt instantly. The consumption of trans fats introduces stiffness at the molecular level. It is a blockage of the flow of qi, or vital energy, within the body. When the physical channels are blocked by rigid fats, the mind becomes rigid as well. The individual may find themselves stuck in repetitive thought patterns, unable to learn new skills or adapt to new situations. This lack of neuroplasticity is a hallmark of an aging brain, but it is accelerated drastically by dietary choices. To cultivate a mind that remains agile and capable of learning, one must consume fats that support fluidity, such as those found in olive oil, avocados, and nuts. These fats keep the cell membranes soft and permeable, ensuring rapid signal transmission. An applied scenario illustrates this mechanism clearly. Imagine a person who regularly consumes fast food for dinner: fries, breaded chicken, or onion rings. These foods are typically cooked in reused industrial oils that are high in trans fats and oxidative byproducts. Over time, this person notices that they have trouble multitasking or switching between topics in a conversation. They might walk into a room and forget why they entered, or struggle to find the right word in a sentence. This is not just senior moments. It is the manifestation of compromised membrane fluidity. The brain is struggling to fire signals across synapses that have been stiffened by synthetic fats. The person feels a persistent mental resistance, as if thinking requires more effort than it used to. This is the friction of a biological machine that has been lubricated with the wrong oil. It is crucial to recognize that the damage caused by trans fats is also vascular. These fats are notorious for raising LDL cholesterol and promoting the buildup of plaque in the arteries. This narrowing of the blood vessels restricts blood flow to the brain, depriving it of essential nutrients and oxygen. Small, silent strokes, often too minor to cause paralysis but significant enough to kill brain tissue, can occur, accumulating into vascular dementia. The brain is essentially starved of the resources it needs to maintain itself. Heng emphasizes the importance of circulation, of keeping the pathways open. A diet free of fried foods and trans fats protects the vascular highways, ensuring that the life force of the blood can reach every corner of the brain. This vascular health is the bedrock of cognitive endurance. Some may argue that strict avoidance of all fried foods is a joyless existence, and that the stress of restriction is worse than the food itself. This perspective fails to account for the joy of vitality. The pleasure of a fried meal lasts for minutes. The pleasure of a sharp, functioning mind lasts for a lifetime. Furthermore, the palate adapts. When one stops coating their tongue with heated industrial oils, the natural flavors of food become more pronounced. The joy derived from toxic food is often a conditioned response, a habit rather than a genuine pleasure. Replacing these foods with nutrient-dense options is not a punishment, but a preference for high-performance living. The clarity that comes from a clean diet provides a satisfaction that far exceeds the fleeting gratification of greasy food. The biochemical impact of trans fats extends to inflammation. These fats trigger a systemic immune response, causing the body to attack its own tissues. In the brain, this neuroinflammation activates microglia, the immune cells of the central nervous system. Chronically activated microglia release toxic chemicals that damage neurons, particularly in the memory centers. This self-destructive cycle is fueled by every serving of trans fats. By eliminating these fats, the individual allows the immune system to stand down. The brain enters a state of calm repair rather than active defense. This reduction in background inflammation preserves cognitive reserve, allowing the brain to function at a high level even in the presence of other aging factors. Heng's philosophy includes the concept of authenticity, being true to one's nature. Trans fats are artificial. They do not exist in nature in the concentrations found in processed foods. They are a fabrication that the human body never evolved to process. Consuming them is a violation of the body's natural order. By aligning the diet with foods that are biologically appropriate, the individual aligns themselves with the natural laws of health. This alignment reduces friction in the system. The body knows how to process an avocado or a walnut. It does not know how to process partially hydrogenated soybean oil without sustaining damage. Returning to natural sources of fat is a return to authenticity, supporting the brain's innate design. The presence of trans fats also disrupts the production of energy within the brain cells. The mitochondria, the power plants of the cells, rely on healthy membranes to function. When the membranes are compromised, energy production drops. This leads to brain fatigue, where the mind tires easily after mental exertion. The individual loses the stamina to read, study, or engage in stimulating conversation. Reversing this by consuming healthy fats restores mitochondrial function, giving the brain the endurance it needs. A revitalized mind is curious and active, seeking out new challenges that further protect against memory loss. The choice to avoid trans fats is a choice for flow over stagnation. It is a commitment to keeping the inner pathways clear and the cellular structures flexible. It represents a deep understanding that the physical quality of the brain determines the quality of the consciousness it generates. By rejecting the rigidity of artificial fats, the individual preserves the fluidity of their mind, ensuring that they remain adaptable, quick-witted, and present. The removal of this blockage allows the natural wisdom and memory to surface without obstruction. Where am I creating resistance in my own body? Restoring the clarity of the mind, the final category of dietary obstacles, involves the spectrum of artificial additives, particularly artificial sweeteners like aspartame, sucralose, and saccharin. Often marketed as healthy alternatives for weight management, these chemical compounds deliver a deceptive signal to the body. They offer the sensation of intense sweetness without the caloric payoff, a mismatch that confuses the brain's reward centers and metabolic regulation. While they may not spike blood sugar in the same way as glucose, they have been shown to disrupt the gut microbiome profoundly, killing off beneficial bacteria that are essential for the production of neuroprotective compounds. Furthermore, some studies suggest that certain artificial sweeteners can cross the blood-brain barrier and act as excitotoxins, overstimulating neurons to the point of exhaustion or death. This chemical deception creates a dissonance within the system, a lack of truth in the biological feedback loop. Heng teaches that truth is the foundation of all growth. One cannot build a strong structure on a false foundation. Artificial additives are, in essence, a lie told to the body. They simulate nourishment but deliver toxicity. To cultivate a mind that is capable of perceiving the truth of the world, one must stop feeding the body falsehoods. The transition to a clean diet is a practice of honesty. It involves stripping away the synthetic layers to reveal the raw, functional reality of the human organism. When the diet is purified of these chemical disruptors, the signals between the gut and the brain become clear and accurate. The cravings for hyper-sweet stimulation fade, replaced by a stable, reliable appetite for genuine nourishment. This restoration of biological truth allows the mind to operate without the static of chemical interference. The journey through these 4 dietary changes, eliminating refined sugars, processed meats, trans fats, and artificial additives, is not merely a nutritional protocol. It is a comprehensive strategy for reclaiming the self. The common thread connecting these foods is that they all induce inflammation, disrupt blood flow, and impair cellular communication. They are the physical manifestations of the dust that Heng speaks of, the accumulation of which obscures the mirror of the mind. By systematically removing these pollutants, the individual stops the active erosion of their memory. The brain, which is plastic and resilient, is given the chance to heal. Inflammation subsides, membranes regain their fluidity, and new neural pathways begin to form. This is the promise of the body. Given the right conditions, it always leans toward health. This path requires a shift in identity. The individual must move from seeing themselves as a passive consumer of industrial food products to an active guardian of their own vitality. It is a move from unconscious eating to conscious fueling. This shift is empowering. It reframes aging not as an inevitable decline, but as a phase of life that demands higher standards of self-care. The discipline required to make these choices becomes a source of pride and self-respect. It proves to the individual that they have command over their impulses, and this command extends to their thoughts and emotions. The clarity of mind that results is not just about remembering keys or names. It is about retaining the essence of who one is. It is about preserving the ability to connect with loved ones, to share wisdom, and to continue learning until the very end. The synthesis of these principles leads to a state of holistic wellness. The physical body becomes lighter and more efficient, the energy levels stabilize, and the mind becomes sharp and spacious. This state is the fertile ground in which wisdom grows. In the Shaolin tradition, the ultimate goal is not just physical strength, but the cultivation of a spirit that is unburdened and free. A memory that functions well is a tool for this liberation, allowing the individual to learn from the past without being trapped by it. By protecting the brain from the toxicity of the modern food environment, the individual secures their most valuable asset. They ensure that their later years are defined not by what they have lost, but by the depth of what they have retained and understood. The clarity achieved is the ultimate victory, a testament to a life lived with intention and discipline. What potential opens up when my mind is finally clear?